I am Captain Mike Monahan of the Bedford Police Department. I'd like to invite you inside as we take a virtual tour so we can discuss some of the concerns that we have with our current size of our facility. So as we come into the police department, the first room that we're going to enter is our outer lobby area, and here we have our dispatch window. It is not a soundproof area. Additionally, we have our building departments and fire departments located in here with us. As such, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic coming and going. Anyone that comes in to meet with the police department, because of that, is not going to have a private area where they can meet with the officers unless the officers bring them into the innermost part of the department. The concerns there is that typically is a secured area. It's not one where we would like to do the majority of our business. And we're going to see that further as we go into the inner part of the lobby. So here we are in our innermost lobby. Again, it's the lobby space that's shared with the building department and the fire department. Any individuals coming in to meet with officers are going to have to do so without the benefit of a private room off the lobby in order to meet with those individuals. Additionally, over here we have a males and females restroom. In a minute we're going to see the hindrances of the males restroom in the lobby, as we have mechanical rooms actually that you have to access through the stalls. Additionally, over here we have our training room and our chief secretary's office. Those areas we'll discuss momentarily, but the biggest concern here is lack of fortification. There's some security concerns that become very evident when you have this area, when you have to bring individuals through this lobby and then actually have to bring them into the innermost part of the department where it is secure. So as we just mentioned earlier, our men's room kind of creates for interesting side conversations, as somebody might be using the restroom and we have maintenance, vendors having to access our utility room, janitorial staff, as you're going to see here in a minute. As you come through, you'll notice that we have, this is our lobby restroom. As we pass through our single stall here, we have to access our janitorial closet, as again, we have multiple vendors coming in here. It is an electrical room. Routinely, you will have people utilizing the facilities at the same time that vendors have to have access to it. Clearly, that creates a conflict, and it's not the best that we would hope for. Also, we have our training room located off our inner lobby, as is the Chief Secretary's office. As you come into the training room, it's one that is open to the public. We try to make it as accessible as possible for everybody. Unfortunately, due to size constraints, that will create a conflict in the usage. So we will routinely have conflict between officers trying to utilize it, other departments within the town trying to utilize it, civilian organizations and members trying to utilize it. So it is fairly limited. It is relatively small for the training that we do. We have to do our defensive tactics in here. We will try to host training in here. Again, due to the size constraints, it is difficult to do that. Additionally, over my shoulder, you can see that the Chief Secretary is here. It is not the ideal situation in that, again, it should be a fortified area for staff safety. So over here in the administrative wing, we do have storage space. However, it is not very big at all. In fact, any overflow that we have to utilize the men's and women's restroom, as you're going to see here momentarily. Additionally, we also have a small IT hub in here. Our IT department is constantly telling us that that's probably less than adequate because of cybersecurity reasons, physical security to any sort of internet area, utilizing the lock on this door. However, that gets conflicted because you have to have civilian staff, administrative staff, retrieving files, documents, papers, things like that. As you come down this way, you're going to notice that we have a men's room, as mentioned, and that is also utilized for storage, as well as a female's restroom, again, that is used for overflow storage. You're going to see multiple rooms throughout the dispatch center, the sergeant's office, where it's the same theme. We do not have the adequate storage space in order to appropriately place items. So we have to get creative on a daily basis as to where we're going to keep things. Also in the administrative side, we have our investigators and our detectives wings. In here we have a ad hoc detectives locker room. The reason why it's down here is because we have completely outgrown the locker space for the rank and file officers. You're going to see momentarily that the locker room, there's very little room for growth in there, and currently we're not at capacity as far as our officers. Once that happens, we're going to run out. Additionally, you're going to see in the sergeant's office that they also have to now utilize their offices. They're changing in locker room area. And again, when you have male, female detectives and sergeants, obviously that creates a whole slew of problems there. So again, locker areas, locker storage areas, it's a huge problem throughout the department. And again, we'll illustrate that momentarily. So here we have our detectives office. Here we have the most serious cases come through, cases that maybe would start in patrol. They make their way here into detectives. They take a little bit more specialization, more time, more investigative techniques to resolve. And oftentimes what you have, as you'll see, is you'll have competing conversations on the phone. You will have multiple interviews taking place at the same time. We have all of our detectives in here. We also have 2 SROs that share a desk in here. We have absolutely no more room. We are at capacity. And realistically, our detective division, we anticipate growth in the near future, possibly the SRO position as well. If that happens, we would have absolutely no place to put them. Clearly, we are on top of each other in here. And again, this perfectly illustrates the space concerns that we have here at our current facilities, and illustrates the need that we have just outgrown what we have currently. Here we have our prosecutor's office, and our prosecutor will routinely meet with victims of crimes in this location. The downside is obviously the size constraint that we have here. You'll notice that he has his chairs here to visit with them. There is absolutely zero soundproofing. You'll notice the hearing in progress sign. Routinely we'll have to take virtual hearings, ALS hearings, things like that. And again, you're going to hear other offices, other people walking, checking the area, having conversations and communications with other people. So there's absolutely zero soundproofing going on in here. And when you have a victim of domestic violence or some other physical assault, it can be very alarming to them whether or not their privacy is going to be maintained. So clearly this is a concern. So here we have our prosecutor's assistant, and part of her responsibility is obviously maintaining all of the records, the arrest records that we have. Unfortunately, due to size constraints, we have a very limited number of records here. We have records that are upstairs on the 2nd floor in an area we refer to as the link. Again, simply due to size constraints, we have areas also with our records clerk. And the simple reason being is we do not have adequate spacing to store them all. So what this means is occasionally our legal assistant will, instead of having the records that she needs, the most recent records that she needs on hand, she would then have to go upstairs, which is at the upstairs opposite end of the building, and then retrieve those records, come back down, do whatever work she needs to do with that, and then return those. Again, it's inefficient, and it's all due to the size constraints here in the department. As we make our way into the interior part of the department, we've come past our first security door. As I mentioned earlier, any individual that needs to meet with an officer would then have to come through these same security doors. They would move off to this door to our 2nd interview room. The first interview room is located adjacent to the detective's office. Anytime we have co-defendants where we might have to do interviews, we would have to separate. We would utilize the first closest interview room off of booking, and then utilize the second. The downside to that is you now have a prisoner who would then have to now walk through the unsecured, unfortified lobby through to the administrative wing, over to the detective's interview room, and conduct the interview there. Clearly there's some officer safety concerns, there's prisoner concerns. If there's civilians in the area, you have to clear that before you walk them through. It's a bit of a logistical problem. It can be overcome, but again, it's not ideal. It's not the best standards, best practices. If you want, you can come with me here. We'll go into our booking area. And as we make our way into the booking area, it is comprised of 3 what we refer to as hard cells. Anybody that's being detained until they can be transported to the jail will be placed in one of the 3 hard cells. They're obviously secured, they're searched, things like that, and they're held there. This is our intox room, and what happens here is anytime we bring somebody in that is under suspicion of operating a vehicle while impaired, they can be given a breath test in here. The one concern that is in this area is it's just condensed on top of each other. If you have multiple defendants, and we have had that, it can be officer safety concerns. You can have defendants within access to each other. And that is not ideal. If we could maybe check out the floors. We do have some drainage here. Due to the age of the plumbing in this area, this room has flooded several times. Over here on this wall, we have what's called an APHIS machine. That is our fingerprint machine, if you will. The flooding reached the base of the APHIS machine, so that we had to come in with some pallets, and we actually had to lift it up onto the pallets to make sure that it did not get damaged. That is provided from the state, and that is very, very expensive. So clearly, the flooding issues in here have been a concern. We have another drain located over here. What we refer to as a soft cell area is this area right here. The purpose for here is when a prisoner is brought into custody and brought into the booking area, they're first brought into here. The desk on the other side allows the officers to ask them booking related questions, such as their address, their date of birth, name, information like that, contact information. The concerns here is, again, due to size restrictions of the area, you have had defendants try and attempt to grab keyboards, bail commissioner paperwork. As the bail commissioners come in to meet with the prisoners, they will be on this side of the wall. And again, just because of the face-to-face interaction between the two, it has caused safety concerns in the past. So again, that's something that if we were to get a new facility, that could be worked out, increase the safety of the space, and assist with improving the plumbing updates, the concerns of juveniles being brought in here. By law, we have to keep juveniles sight and sound separated from adult offenders. Again, given the tightness of the booking area, that is difficult at best. Oftentimes what will end up happening is we will bring the juvenile to a office and have them sit down and wait for their custodian to pick them up in that location. So off of the booking room, we have our evidence rooms, and that is not ideal. You would ideally like to have a separate entrance for the evidence, as if we have a prisoner being booked in here, you have detectives coming and going, you might have other officers trying to secure evidence at the same time. You would obviously want to separate them for the officer safety reasons, as well as potentially damaging or having any concerns with the evidence as well. Officers will come in here, they will utilize packaging for the evidence, prepare their evidence to be placed into one of our secured lockers, at which time a detective will later come in. We do have a limited number of space in here for the lockers. We have 3 medium-sized lockers, and we have a handful of smaller-sized lockers. Again, it's limited in space, so if you were to have a large case, a restraining order with multiple pieces coming in, it creates a logistical problem to be able to secure those items and be able to bring those items into the evidence room. As you can see, we have a number of items out here that are for packaging purposes, and it's very cluttered. There's not much room for them to work, and again, it just cannot be helped due to the size of our current facility. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to step further into the evidence room. This evidence room is accessed only by authorized personnel, and it is a limited number. As you come in here, you can see that we have a detective's workspace here who will process incoming evidence. As the evidence comes in, it's then assigned a property storage location. As you come into the evidence room, you are going to see that we have run out of space. We ran out of space some time ago. It may look like it is disorganized, but it's actually organized chaos. The items on the floor are currently being processed and worked on. We have very limited shelving space in here. The other concern with evidence, as the Bedford Police Department is trying to go through the CALEA accreditation process, the best standards and practices for evidence is your firearms, narcotics, and high-value items should have their own additional secured area. Currently, we do not have that, and without making major modifications to the department, we would not be able to get that. And even that would only allow for the segregation of those items. It does not allow for further expansion. Clearly, this evidence room, while adequate when the facility was made, is no longer adequate as we have lost space to add. As we move out from the evidence room in the booking area, we're going to be moving into the Sallyport area. The Sallyport area is where prisoners will come in with officers. Ideally, this would be a sterile location. What do I mean by sterile is the only thing in this area would be a place for them to secure their sidearms, the place for them to park their cruisers, and the doorway to get in. Currently, because of the lack of space that we have in the rest of the department, you can see that we have ammunition, motorcycle, mountain bikes, tools for security, officer security, and safety reasons. This is not ideal. It's not best practice. The other problem with this is there's only room for one vehicle at a time. What happens is oftentimes you will have more than one prisoner come in or more than one transport come in. Ideally, what would happen is the vehicle would drive in, you have the Sallyport door shut, and the officer could then have time to secure their sidearm, extract the subject from the vehicle, and safely bring them into booking. When we have more than one defendant, however, we have to keep the Sallyport door open. We will have the other cruiser park outside. Again, it's not secure because we now have the door open. So it's just one other barrier of protection to prevent that individual from trying to escape. The other problem in this area is because we do not have an impound yard that is completely secured or sealed off, anytime we might have to process a vehicle, our investigators have to park it here while they obtain a search warrant, while they obtain the equipment and the packaging materials, the personnel needed to process that vehicle. That vehicle stays in here and it's now occupied the only Sallyport area that we have. So again, that creates an officer safety concern. If people are coming and going, which has routinely happened, we have to stop processing, allow a prisoner or somebody that's being transported into the booking area, and then resume processing. Again, we can make it happen, but it's not ideal. It is far from ideal. And again, the big thing here is just not having the adequate space. The current facilities, while we can get the job done, it causes problems, safety and security problems, when you compromise and have to be forced to make stuff work. So this is outside of our Sallyport area. Again, as I mentioned before, anytime we have the Sallyport occupied, vehicles would then have to come in and park here and utilize making entry that way. The other thing, best practice, would be for a one-way operation into the Sallyport. Anytime a vehicle is transporting, the Sallyport door would open, the officer would transport the subject into the Sallyport would close, and then there would be another door on the opposite side that would, after that vehicle has finished what it needs to do, it would then leave that other door. So again, it's one flow operation. Here, we have to make do by having the officers back their vehicles up. There is numerous amount of other vehicle traffic coming through the area. There's pedestrian traffic. There's vehicles that are parked in close proximity. Again, it creates a safety and a hazard for officers having to back up in that space. As we look behind me at the rest of the area by our Sallyport, you're going to notice several Connex containers. The purpose for that is we have simply run out of room even utilizing the temporary storage in the Sallyport, we have more than reached our capacity. As such, we've had to augment by acquiring these Connex containers. We have equipment in there, bicycles, any other additional things that are large that we need to make room. As mentioned before, with our Connexes, there's no fortifications out here. There's no external fencing. It is under video surveillance. We do have officers coming and going routinely. However, again, we have Route 101 facing, right behind us, and it is not, again, the most ideal secured solution for the equipment needs that we are currently utilizing it for. As you can see, one of the other problems that we have back here is the exposure to the vehicles. Currently we have a couple out on the road right now, but we have run out of room for even the carport area, which does mitigate some of the weather and effects that the vehicles suffer from. However, it is far from ideal. They are fairly tight in there, and any other vehicles that we're going to need in the future, there's absolutely no room to put them. As we pan further over, this is a cellular communications tower that multiple vendors have to utilize. Anytime that they are servicing the tower, the only place that they have to park is literally right here in the middle. Again, hindering our officers and any other traffic coming through the area, as they tend to block the area. Again, through no fault of their own, just that it's on top of the facility. As mentioned before, in the public restroom, we said that there was a stall that vendors had to go through. Again, anytime that this tower is being operated on, those vendors will have to access that backside going through that one restroom, thereby essentially removing that restroom from use. We have our standby generator here outside of our administrative office. While convenient that it's close by, and we're grateful that we have it, because any loss of power, it's instantaneously brought back by this generator. It is a distraction due to the size, just the location that it's right off of the building itself. As we're outside in the parking lot, I just want to illustrate that there is virtually no room for expansion for parking. As I mentioned before, we're probably looking to add on positions in the near future. And even with the current staffing levels and even just filling vacancies that we currently have, we are almost at capacity as far as parking. That excludes any town events that are being utilized for the training room, any police department functions that are being utilized for the training room. And this is just a typical day here as far as the parking. The other concerns with the parking is you have no physical barrier or segregations other than signages from law enforcement and employee parking to civilian use parking towards the front. We actually have had, on a couple occasions, individuals back here attempting to go through employee vehicles back here. We were able to intercept in a fairly quick amount of time, but again, that illustrates the need for security back here. This is our communications center, and this is where we receive our 911 calls. Dispatchers will provide those calls to the officers. It is a state-of-the-art communications dispatch center. However, the biggest problem here is space. As you make your way around the dispatch center, you're going to see that their restroom is adjacent and directly off the center. And you're going to note that dispatchers do not have their own locker room. They have to utilize the space available to them in the restroom. They also have to utilize that area for their fridge as well as their microwave, which is less than ideal. So here we have our roll call room. This is where officers at the start of their shift and the end of their shift will trade information, talk about what's going on, any calls for service that they need to be aware of, and anything else going on in the patrol division that is of relevant information. It is a fairly decent sized room. However, when you have both shifts overlapping, it tends to be very loud. And officers will end up filling this room very, very quickly. As you look behind you, we have our officers' workspace. It is in close proximity. Again, due to the close proximity, you will have multiple conversations, multiple phone calls being discussed on cases, speaking with witnesses. So again, it gets very competitive, and officers will end up having to compete for that space. And over here we have our patrol sergeant's office, and as you come in, you're going to see that, again, the biggest thing is size or lack thereof. The locker room that we're going to be seeing in a minute no longer has any space available for our patrol sergeants, so they will utilize this as their office space as well as their locker room. and we have both male and female patrol sergeants, and obviously that creates a little bit of a logistical nightmare as they're preparing to get ready for their shift. So as I mentioned before, we have several locations where our records are kept. The prosecutor's office, the records clerk's office. We do also have personnel records located in the deputy chief's office. The remainder of the records are either going to be in here or they're actually in a secure vault within our building department, of which we have to access, go through the building department's office space, interrupt their day, interrupt their meetings, and then access those files. Again, that's just because we have no centralized records location, and that is simply due to not having enough space. All right, we're now going to make our way into the officers, the men's officers' locker room, right this way. And as you can see, it is not a very large space at all. We have run out of locker space, save the occasional one or two lockers, which are smaller compared to these lockers. Once we are at full capacity, we will have no more room for locker space in here. So here we have the locker room restroom. This area is shared with the Bedford Fire Department. So anytime at the beginning, middle, or end of shifts, you could be competing with the shifts coming and going for both officers as well as the fire department. And again, it is a limited number of space. This is the only patrol side restroom in the entire facility in which they have their own bathroom. Administrative bathrooms they can certainly use. General public lobby areas they can certainly use, but for security reasons, obviously that is not ideal. And again, this is a limited shared space. So as I mentioned before, this is our Sallyport area. And as such, it's the start of the booking process. And it's probably the area that has the biggest exposure, risk, and liability for officer safety, any prisoner that we have, as well as the town. Let me walk you through kind of what the typical process would be for any transport that the officer have once they make an arrest, from start to finish, as we see through the booking area, through the follow-up interview phase afterwards. So as the officer comes in, our Sallyport door is raised. The officer would bring their vehicle inside. As I mentioned before, this should be a sterile area because you don't want any sort of blunt tool, anything like that, to be turned on the officers or anyone else. Clearly, while we try to make sure that there's no obvious implementations that can be used against the officers, there's still numerous items in here, and that causes a concern. And that's just strictly because we don't have any place else to put them. Again, if we have multiple transports, best practices is if we have two subjects, they would be transported individually. Males would be transported separate from females. Juveniles would be separated from adults. That means if we have multiple vehicles coming in, we no longer have the benefit of having the vehicle come in, the security door being brought down, removing the individual, and then bringing him in for booking. As we move our way, the officer would then secure their sidearm into one of these locked weapons boxes. They would then come over here. Of particular concern in this area and possible risk and exposure to liability is this is not a flush ground floor area. That means officers as well as the prisoners now have to step up. Additionally, you have two outward opening doors in the same alcove. Anybody coming through this side, which is where the general officers will come and go at the start and end of their shift or throughout their shift, as well as anybody coming into or out of the booking area. So as we make our way in, please watch your step. We would then come in through the evidence area. All right, once we come into the booking area, the officers can secure any evidence that they have in the temporary storage lockers. Again, anytime we have an arrest with multiple pieces of property, multiple arrests, if anybody earlier in the shift has come in and they secured property, pending a detective taking it and securing it into the internal evidence storage area, these will fill up very, very quickly. A detective will then have to be called in, stopping whatever that they're doing, to empty these to facilitate more space for patrol officers to secure the evidence. And the patrol officer would come in, throw in the evidence into the locker. They would then remove the key, put that inside, close this, and when they close it without the key in it, it secures it automatically. The prisoner would then come over here to the soft cell area. They would be placed inside the soft cell area while the officer starts the processing of the individual, gets their personal information, name, address, things like that. They start the paperwork. Once they're searched and secured, at some point during the booking process, they will come over here and they will have their fingerprints taken on our AFIS machine. They will have their booking photos taken on camera. Any property that the prisoner will have will be secured during the duration of the booking process in these lockers here. Depending upon the type of investigation, if there's any interviews that need to be conducted or interrogations that need to be conducted, the officer and/or detective will then remove the individual and bring them over to one of two one of two interview rooms. And we'll go through right now, as mentioned before, the area outside of detectives. So I'll have you step this way. As we come this way, we would have the prisoner being escorted by an officer. Again, past this door locks from the outside coming in, so this is our first secured barrier to the internal part of the department. However, we would have to bring the prisoner through to the administrative wing where our interview room is. Clearly, this is a hazard, a risk, and another liability if any civilians are in the area, if any civilian employee staff is in the area. We're walking them through. If there was ever a time that they were going to contemplate escaping, it would be in this area. So this is logistically, safely, liability-wise, a nightmare. But again, it's something that we have to do. So we'll walk this way. Again, we would bring the prisoner through our lobby area. As you can see, we could have commingling between prisoner and civilian. Now we would be bringing the prisoner in through the administrative wing. Again, there would be commingling with civilian staff. They would then come down into our interview and interrogation room, which is located in here. They would then be interviewed inside the interview and interrogation room. As noted before, we have the cell tower to the rear. We have the officers who would be starting their shift. And while we have done everything we can to soundproof this room, big liability is, as you look through this mesh cage, we have our cell phone area and we have our cruiser area. So if you're conducting a sensitive interview or interrogation in here and you have vendors working on the tower, if you have officers doing their cruiser checks, during which time they're going to check all of their emergency lighting, they're going to check their sirens. Even though this room is soundproofed this way, it's still going to pick up those artifacts externally on camera, and it's going to interrupt and hinder the interview or the interrogation. As we conclude our tour, I'd like to take the time to thank you for watching this video of our tour, virtual tour of the facility. I've been with the Bedford Police Department a little over 21 years now, going on my 22nd year. And during that time, I've seen a lot of growth within the town, schools, other departments, the residents, the businesses. Our department has grown as well. The one thing that has not grown to meet those demands is the facility. And currently, while the facility itself is in generally good condition, the biggest area, the biggest risk and liability that is posed is just the lack of space. As you've seen in the Sallyport area, in detectives, in lockers room, we are literally bursting at the seams. And that is the biggest concern that we have, to be able to bring our best services to you, the public, the town, as well as to our employees and staff. So I would like to take the time again to thank you. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, I'm sure that there's other things that we can talk about. Please reach out, and any of our officers would like to be happy to assist with you in that, answering those questions.